Hi everyone! So for our research project, we did the Trick or Treaty documentary. We are group number 12 and our members are me, Rachel Amawala, and Janelle De La Vega. So the maker of the film is Alanis Abomsawin, who is one of the most respected Indigenous filmmakers in the world. She transitioned from theater and storytelling to film. Since being employed by the NFB in 1967 as a consultant, she generated an incredible body of work, 50 films and counting, which includes significant documentaries like Incident at the Restigouche and the Kanesatake 270 Years of Resistance. The Abenaki filmmaker has won multiple awards on a global scale, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York City featured a retrospective of her work in 2008. Abomsawin believes that education remains her main focus because it is where you develop yourself, where you learn to hate or to love. So the documentary Trick or Treaty is Abomsawin's 41st documentary, which was released in 2014 and discusses the Treaty Number 9, which governs a sizable portion of Northern Ontario, and is an example of how First Nations and the Crown frequently interpret treaties in conflict with one another. The descendants of the Cree Nation claim the treaty's original intent to share the land and its resources has been misconstrued and is not being respected, while the Canadian government views it as a surrender of Indigenous sovereignty. The Trick or Treaty documentary presents one community's efforts to uphold its treaty rights and safeguard its lands in a short and compelling manner, illuminating the complexity of modern treaty agreements. So, the contributions of the documentary. So, within the documentary, you'll find official news and conference clips from government officials regarding the Treaty Number 9 issue, footage from the protests at the Parliament in Ottawa, interviews with locals from different Indigenous nations and how the issue affects them, footage involving the actual documents from the original Treaty Number 9 agreement. So, the reason for Treaty Number 9. The intrusion of non-Indigenous prospectors and trappers on Indigenous ancestral territories worried the Cree and Ojibwe people of the James Bay region in the 1880s. The Hudson Bay's company traders and representatives of the federal and provincial governments received vocal and written complaints from the Cree and Ojibwe tribes. Specifically, they were worried about the local beaver population decline. They desired protection of their territories, wealth, and fur-bearing creatures. So, a brief history of Treaty Number 9. It is also known as the James Bay Treaty, and it is an agreement between Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Cree, Amushkawik, as well as other Indigenous nations, Algonquin, and the Crown. The Crown was represented by 2 commissioners assigned by Canada and 1 commissioner assigned by Ontario. The James Bay and Hudson Bay areas in Ontario, which encompass nearly 2/3 of the province's entire landmass, are covered by this 1905 and 1906 treaty. The nation-to-nation connection between First Nations and the Crown is embodied in the treaty, and the oral treaty promises are legally binding as terms of the treaty. So there is written evidence of the oral promises that are made by the treaty commissioners, and they are recorded in the following documents. The James Bay Treaty, official report of the Treaty Commissioners 1905 and 1906, Diaries of Duncan Campbell Scott 1905 and 1906, Diaries of Samuel Stewart 1905 and 1906, Diaries of Daniel McMartin 1905, The Last of Indian Treaties, an article by Duncan Campbell Scott in 1905, and 1200 Miles by Canoe, an article by Pelham Edgar from 1906 to 1907. So in short, Indigenous peoples' understanding of the treaty was that the land and resources would be shared. The Crown, however, misinterprets it as Indigenous peoples surrendering their sovereignty, and this has led to our current day issue with forced extractivism and the exploitation of environmental laws. So the outcomes of the Treaty Number 9 misinterpretation are that Indigenous people continue to face poverty due to the lack of resources caused by forced extractivism by settlers, and which has led to the Idle No More movement. So the Idle No More movement is a secondary focus of the documentary, and it started in November 2012 between the treaty people of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. So the movement protests the Canadian government's deconstruction of environmental laws, which affect the Indigenous people living on the land. It is originally led by Saskatchewan women Jessica Gordon, Sheila McLean, Sylvia McAdam, and Nina Wilson. And it is a continent-wide movement now that encourages a nation-to-nation mutual respect for the land, as well as protection of the Indigenous rights to the protection of the land, sky, and water. The movement works hand in hand with both Indigenous and non-Indigenous supporters. So some additional resources to learn more about Treaty Number 9 and the Idle No More movement are Vice's article about the documentary Chicker Treaty, called Shows What Lengths the Government Will Go to Protect Their Interests. An article from the Raven Trust, which is Chicker Treaty, an update on the Beaver Lake Cree Nation campaign, which is a more updated piece of information that kind of shows what's going on with the movement as of 2022. The About Treaty Number 9 page on the Anishinaabe Aski Nation website, which involves the actual documents of the Treaty Number 9, some basic information, and how you can help, as well as the Idle No More website's page on the Indigenous-led movement, which can teach you more about the movement and how you can help with that. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. Here are some discussion questions you can think about. So extractivism and exploitation of natural resources is an ongoing issue within the Indigenous community as it disregards their land rights. What is your opinion on contractors building housing on pieces of land that are protected by environmental laws like the Greenbelt as the demand for more housing and affordable housing increases? And also, what are some ways us settlers can respect Indigenous land as the urbanization of Ontario continues?